Hello and welcome to The Deep Dive. Today we're taking a deep dive into a fascinating source you shared with us. It's a personal memoir titled My Wild Ride.
That's right. And it really is a journey, isn't it? Through a life just packed with adventure, challenges, some really close calls, and, these deep connections he formed.
Yeah.
So our mission here really is to navigate this personal history. We want to pull out the key insights, those surprising moments, and try to understand the forces that shaped this remarkable story.
Think of it like exploring someone's life map, you know?
Yeah.
Finding the unexpected turns, the detours, and those moments where everything just seemed to change. We'll be pulling out those specific details, the anecdotes that really bring the story to life and figure out why they matter.
Exactly. And as always, we're diving into your sources, helping you most important, what really stands out, and, why it matters in the bigger picture. So let's unpack this ride.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning then. The memoir opens in Toledo, Ohio, Ottawa Hills specifically.
Right.
And it sets the scene with what sounds like a pretty textbook normal childhood, at least at first. 66 Canterbury Court, two older brothers, a dog, until he was about 6.
Yes, it paints that picture. A well-heeled neighborhood, he calls it, but still kind of middle class.
Yeah.
But like you said, that normalcy, the memoirist makes it really clear it was shattered pretty abruptly.
And that shattering moment was the loss of his mother, suddenly. He was just 6. It was 1956. She passed away from lung cancer, only 37.
Yeah.
The source describes the house just going dark, her vibrant presence
Yeah.
just gone.
And it's not just presented as a sad event.
Yeah.
The memoir frames it as the single most impactful moment of his young life. He writes about being thrown instantly into independence.
At 6. Wow.
Right? At an age when kids are usually so dependent, he's left with these grieving, sometimes angry older brothers and a father who's dealing with his own, profound loss. It created this environment where there wasn't much room, it seems, for understanding his plight, as he puts it, or for providing that really crucial maternal nurturing.
So what does the memoir say happened then? What was the immediate kind of fallout from that kind of shock and absence, especially so young?
Well, it directly links it to the emergence of this persona he calls the lost wild child.
Lost wild child.
Yeah. He describes feeling instantly strong, but also rebellious, definitely attention-starved. And it came out as, acting out, leading his friends into mishaps, getting known for being kind of brash. It's presented as a direct, almost like primal response to that huge loss and the sudden lack of structure or focused care.
Wow. Instantly strong and attention starved. That really does feel like two sides of the same coin, doesn't it? Forged by that loss. But he found other outlets too, right? It wasn't all acting out.
Oh, absolutely. The memoir really highlights finding solace in nature, specifically this unsettled wild area behind the neighbors' houses, the O'Haras and McKissons,
Yeah.
where these two creeks met.
Right.
He describes the wildlife there, calling it a taste of nature in the raw and salvation in many respects. It sounds like it really helped fill that void.
And there was the dog too, right? Missy.
Missy, yeah. The steadfast family Cocker Spaniel, offering that kind of unconditional comfort when the human world felt, well, chaotic.
So even in this really early chapter, marked by loss and rebellion, you can already see the seeds of these themes that keep coming back. That connection to the wild, the power of loyalty maybe, and finding solace outside of, the usual places.
Definitely. And speaking of connection, the pull of the gang starts to become a really big theme around age 12 or 13.
Yes, the gang.
The formation of the Spider Gang. That
Yeah.
was with Alan McKisson and Jamie O'Hara initially. The memoir describes this first trio really solidifying that need for a gang, a tight group for support and identity. They even had this high-pitched yelp ritual walking to school.
Okay. And the initiation for new members sounds pretty memorable.
Unforgettable might be the word. Running naked around Canterbury Court at night, through a neighborhood they knew well, about a dozen houses.
No way.
Yeah. Richie Thull, Bob Shopneck, who apparently got the most snuggies.
Snuggies, that like a...
Hoisting someone up by their underwear until it rips. Sounds painful, right? A real rite of passage. And Mark Richards joined this way, too.
Ouch. That definitely speaks to the lengths they went to belong, to prove they were in. It wasn't just a prank. It was like a test.
Exactly. A test of commitment, a shared, crazy experience.
Your pop culture played a role, too, like seeing West Side Story.
Yeah, when he was 11. Apparently, that really solidified the gang idea even more.
Yeah.
Led to mock knife fights with combs,
Cones. Okay.
leaving raw places
Yeah.
on their arms.
Yeah.
He calls it good fun, but it was all within their, protective neighborhood bubble.
But that bubble had its limits. The source talks about them venturing out, crossing the tracks to Mel's diner.
Right, and encountering these hardened older kids. The memoirist even notes how this area drew a different class of Toledo resident, even black people, highlighting how those tracks were a real, literal divide.
And that encounter turned serious fast. Broken glass bottles.
Yeah. Produced by the older kids, he writes about experiencing real fear for the first time in that kind of situation. They just bolted, tails between our legs.
That sounds like a harsh dose of reality. Their neighborhood bravado just evaporated when faced with real danger.
Totally. A sudden realization that the world outside their little zone was, well, a lot less predictable.
Then skateboarding became the next big thing. Crude boards, he says, but lots of thrills.
Skinned knees and elbows were badges of courage.
Huh. And that story about the downhill ride with Jamie O'Hara sounds like pure kid craziness.
Absolutely. Gaining speed, no clear exit plan, and the only option was just diving onto the grass divider at the bottom to avoid a serious wipeout.
Those shared close calls
Mm-hmm.
and the rituals like the spider promise where lying was a huge deal, punishable by Snuggie.
Right.
It all really cemented the gang. And then the ultimate bonding, becoming blood brothers with Jamie.
Yeah, picking at skateboard scabs until they ooze blood. It really highlights that intense need for connection, especially for Jamie, who this source suggests maybe craved that brotherhood, having two older sisters. They weren't just friends. They were forging something deeper, almost like family.
And Jamie's mother, Lindy O'Hara, played this really surprising role in all this.
Didn't she just? Described as strikingly beautiful, compact, strong, and she fully embraced our gang.
She gave them the tool shed for a clubhouse and paint, which led to that infamous paint fight.
A full-fledged paint fight. But more than that, she included them, took them to movies, on trips, Devil's Lake.
The Z-Muck incident, wrestling for lost swim trunks in the muck.
Exactly. And even spring break in Fort Lauderdale, it sounds like she offered some of that missing maternal presence, but with this really generous, fun-loving spirit.
She sounds like a completely different kind of nurturing figure than he'd maybe experienced since his mom died.
Precisely. Someone who saw their energy, their need for connection, and sort of channeled it positively. It's another example of finding a form of family outside the usual structure, which is a theme we see again and again.
It's also interesting that the memoir mentions their early environmental awareness here, being incensed about the polluted creek.
But swimming in it anyway, carefully keeping their heads out. A funny little contradiction.
So from Ottawa Hills, the path takes a pretty sharp turn. An unhappy home life with his stepmother.
Yeah, described as ice cold.
Led to boarding school. Cranbrook, near Detroit.
And he calls this move Save My Life. It provided structure, a change of scenery, and a respected prep school. And interestingly, he writes, another gang formed there. Just naturally this time, no initiation needed.
Still needing that connection.
Seems so. Bill McGraw, an outdoorsman, was part of that group.
Then, after Cranbrook, it was off to the University of Denver. But the memoir is pretty blunt about college. Formal education was torture.
He says it plainly. Wanted to dig into life, not sit in the classroom wishing I wasn't. So he bails after the first quarter of his junior year.
Which he admits disappointed his parents, especially with his older brothers being these, cum laude grad students.
Yeah, it shows that pull towards independent exploration was just stronger than sticking to the conventional path.
So leaving college led to, what does he call them? Stupid odd jobs.
Yeah, catering, tree trimming, selling satellite dishes. The memoir doesn't gloss over that phase until he buys a house with a childhood friend and writes, found my shtick in a big way.
And that shtick was real estate in Denver.
So the next 8 years, yeah. Buying, selling, renting, renovating properties.
How did finding that particular passion, that shtick, connect back to those earlier drivers like independence or nature?
Well, what's really insightful, I think, is that real estate wasn't just a job. It became the engine funding his real passion, fly fishing. The memoir highlights these winters spent in New Zealand, Chile, Argentina, chasing rainbows, often completely solo, sleeping on the banks of the rivers, living my dream. So that independence forged way back in childhood, and that connection to nature from the creek. It started manifesting on this huge global scale, all powered by this practical skill he'd found.
That's a great connection, finding a practical way to fuel that deeper calling. Meanwhile, there's another strong geographic pull, Cape Cod, discovered through family connections.
Right. Summer of '69, he arrives in Wellfleet and just takes this bold leap knocks on the side door of Hatch's Fish Market right during the dinner rush looking for work.
And gets hired.
On the spot. By the boss, described vividly as bleary-eyed, just out of the cooler, slugging Fleischmann's whiskey. Classic.
Yeah. And he finds a place to live.
Yeah, this vacant shack that was used for selling jams and jellies makes it work with help from the owners, Cliff and Doris Hatch. They provide furniture, appliances, for $5 a week rent.
$5. And Wellfleet Harbor is described as genuine Cape Cod. Cliff Hatch sounds like quite the character.
Oh, a lovable scoundrel, the memoir calls him. The town drunk, maybe selling slightly suspect fish, pulling fast ones like changing at 20 for a 10, sliding scallops off the scale.
Oh my gosh.
But despite all that, he and Doris, who made these classic Cape meals, they kind of adopted some of the working kids, including the memoirist. Helped furnish his cabin, he'd even sleep over sometimes and do chores, described as half-monkey worker.
So another surrogate family situation emerges, centered around the fish market this time.
Exactly. A real community formed around the chaos of the place. He even managed to take off for Woodstock mid-August with a high school friend, Ed Brown,
Wow, Woodstock.
and still placated Cliff and Doris enough to come back for 2 more seasons. He became inside and one in the gang.
And the work sounds like it was less about the fish and more about the antics.
Totally. A laugh a minute, he says, with Cliff leading the charge. The pranks are legendary.
Okay, like what?
The crude toilet prank. A bucket of water rigged above the toilet, attached to a string.
Oh.
Ripped down only for the right customers or friends, or even us workers.
And the chili prank. Putting hot chili in the potato salad or coleslaw.
And getting frantic phone calls around 6:30 p.m., people in agony running to the bathroom. You could just picture it.
Oh dear.
Cliff also had his little theatrical bits. The lobster hat trick for kids. Using a bullhorn under the counter to make the lobsters sound frisky during the rush.
Making lobster sound frisky. Okay.
Rush hour itself, 5:00 to 6:30, sounds like pure madness. Packed counter, hungry, insistent vacationers, and they deliberately pick out timid customers hiding in the back just to piss off the aggressive ones pushing at the front.
Playing games even then.
And then, sweet relief, Miller time after 6:30. These stories, they really bring that whole environment to life. The humor, the shared chaos, again, creating this unique, chosen community.
It's fascinating how that theme of finding gangs or chosen communities keeps popping up, isn't it? Childhood, work, always offering belonging.
And a unique kind of support, yeah. Which brings us to relationships, where the memoir sometimes uses this idea of thunderbolt moments.
Right. The first big one mentioned is Betsy Mitchell. Met her at Minnetonka, where he was working.
Describes her as a well-nourished plant. And they quickly became an item.
The wooden bridge over the Spring Creek, July 10th, 1967. That's marked as the spot of their first embrace, first kiss. Significant.
And they sailed together, even capsized into icy water. Had to work together to right the boat. Betsy sounds pretty committed, too. She followed him to Wellfleet, even exaggerated her age to get a job there.
Then later, at the University of Denver, he meets Mary Walsh, Friend's younger sister.
Described as drop-dead gorgeous, understated, shy. A former Miss Teenage Rhode Island, who seemed kind of burned out by it all.
And then comes the thunderbolt moment at a kegel party.
The source describes it vividly, locking eyes across the room, heart pounding, couldn't break the trance. And apparently everyone else saw it, too.
Wow.
They left together, went to the Moose Lodge basement where he lived, and Mary more or less moved right in.
That intense connection lasted about a year, though.
Yeah. They drifted apart while he was back in Wellfleet and she was in Newport. Led to a heart-wrenching farewell in Boston. They knew their futures were going different ways.
And the memoir explicitly says this separation brought back that familiar feeling. Loss was becoming a part of my life. How does it connect these later losses, like with Mary, back to those earlier experiences?
It draws a really clear line. He contrasts Mary and Betsy with the earlier female figures. First, the huge, abrupt loss of his biological mother at 6.
Right.
Then, the surrogate mother figure, Rudolph, young, attractive, he loved her, hoped his dad would marry her. But instead, his father married the ice-cold Mrs. Haskell, Anita, an aspiring social climber, bringing rigidity, emotional distance. So the memoir makes it clear that early maternal loss and the lack of certain kinds of nurturing after created this sensitivity to loss that became a recurring theme.
That makes a lot of sense, how that first big loss can just color how you experience separation later on.
Absolutely. It really underscores how those foundational experiences shape us, our connections, our understanding of loss, all through life.
And this brings us back to the gangs idea again, but evolving now into chosen family, these essential support systems in adulthood.
Exactly. The memoir introduces the Gang of Five,
Yeah.
his core group of fishing buddies. He met Neil Hyman first, on the Snake River in Idaho, got invited to fish with Neil's dad's gang from Colorado,
Okay.
reunited with Neil later in Denver. And another member was Rob McClellan, Mac. Met him working back at Hatch's Fish Market.
No kidding. From the Wellfleet days.
Yep. Tall, graceful, red-headed Scot. Shy, steady, dry humor. Sounds like a solid guy.
Definitely.
Mac and Neil planned that big New Zealand trip together, the one that was so formative. And the final member of the core five was James Toby. Met him in New Zealand.
Ah, the expert.
Yeah, Toby had discovered NZ fishing years before, was on a different level. Described as charming, confident, aggressive, black locks, and a wandering eye for fish and ladies. The source notes, Toby was kind of a loner until he met their group. They bonded incredibly deeply, camping by rivers, hiking remote country, all for the fishing. Toby became a legend down there, and apparently shared his knowledge generously.
So this adult gang wasn't about mischief. It was about shared passion, respect.
And deep support, which was really put to the test when Toby was diagnosed with ALS, the gang of five. They assured him and his family they'd support him until his time ran out in abundance.
That's powerful. And they followed through.
Big time. Planned a bone fishing trip for Toby in the Bahamas, said money was no obstacle. Neil found this amazing place on Abaco Island, Little Harbor, on the Bight of Old Robinson.
Wow.
And the memoir describes the whole gang, families and all, just converging there. The description of the place, the house, the bonefish flat right out front, mangroves, channels, blue holes, all accessible. It paints this picture of the chosen family pulling together in a place tied to their shared passion, offering this incredible gesture of love and support right when it was needed most.
It really shows how those bonds forged in adventure became this bedrock when life got incredibly tough. Then there's another group that became like family, the Paul siblings.
Right, meeting Val first from a Dutch family whose house was literally sinking on Long Island. Val, the oldest sister, had kind of taken on the mom role.
And Peter, the eldest brother, creative, resourceful, a head for putting things together, renovated buildings with the memoirist in Denver, had a legendary ability with challenges.
And Eric, the younger brother, acquired a cabin, invented the brush mat with Peter, turned it into a successful business resoling climbing shoes, built a whole community around his shop with his wiener dog Rascal.
Peter Paul's is described in really glowing terms, isn't he?
Almost saintly. Born an angel, selfless and pure. Someone who had apparently been adapting boats for less fortunate people since he was a kid. The handiest man, always helping, even buying boats for others.
So this group represents another kind of chosen family, providing different kinds of support, practical, creative, entrepreneurial, but still rooted in that mutual support, and in Peter's case, this lifelong dedication to helping.
Exactly. These are deep, lasting connections. And the memoir contrasts them, sometimes subtly, sometimes openly, with the sort of unpredictability and loss experienced earlier in his family life.
Beyond these core groups, the memoir talks about other significant people, mentors, characters who left a real mark.
Like Harvey Schrinner, neighbor in Denver, retired union welder, master metalworker, always in denim overalls.
Their connections started over. Peachtree Blight.
Yep. Harv helped with the trees, gardening, which led to metalworking projects, sharpening tools, changing engines in Peugeots. The memoir notes Harv was kind of hungry for projects and acknowledgement, and their friendship gave him that outlet. His appearance, his eclectic style, it's all described with affection.
Then there's Roy Dames, the closest neighbor in Montana, a rancher, lived across the street in a little camper for half the year.
Roy would drive over in his F-150 multiple times a day. They became cribbage buddies.
Right, willing away, rainy days. The memoirists often let Roy win because his sight and coordination weren't great.
Did the begging for him. And Roy and his wife Gladys often had him over for dinner. Gladys, Roy's wife of 5 decades. She's portrayed as this proud, well-kept woman of the land. Neat house, neat yard, towered over Roy, and she was apparently overjoyed to have Frank keep Roy busy.
These interactions sound so genuine. Simple connection, companionship with these, salt-of-the-earth people, grounding.
Definitely. And then there's this whole fascinating section about encountering legendary figures, like Stein Erikson, the ski icon.
Who he knew of from skiing Boyne Mountain, where Stein was the star attraction.
Exactly. They met through a mutual friend, Sherry Merica, who was close to Stein and his wife Francoise, met at their home above the Madison River. And Stein's famous greeting, "I'm so glad you got to meet me."
Putting him right at ease.
Totally. They became fishing friends. And the memoir notes Stein's incredible physical ability, keen eyesight, concentration, execution, made him a quick study at fly fishing, even bow hunting.
There's that story about Stein diffusing a tense situation with some drunk Native American men on the Blackfoot Reservation, too, with panache and grace.
Remarkable. And the anecdotes really bring Stein to life, don't they? Picking wild asparagus in a graveyard. Stein's in a bright white jumpsuit, gracefully using his pocket knife.
You can't make this stuff up.
The picnic with Norwegian Bruno's cheese by McDonald Pond. Stein deferring to the memoirist's fishing experience, then hooking this huge rainbow reel screaming, Stein singing a Norski tune, only for the fish to break him off. Cleaned him, as the memoir puts it. Captures his mastery, but also that humility.
And the Hebgen Lake boat sinking story, forgetting the drain plug.
Oh man, boat goes down fast, 12 feet of water, picnic basket, skis floating. But Stein just stays composed, breaststrokes to shore, makes a joke about launching boats in Norway. Crowd gathering, classic Stein.
And the ski accident. Getting tangled in a fence with a backpack.
At the base of the bullwheel lift, yeah.
Yeah.
Needed ladders and strong arms to get him free. Swore never to ski with a backpack again. Stein's legacy, as described, isn't just about the skiing. It's the style, the graciousness, lack of boast. Those qualities clearly made a huge impression. These encounters show how different people offered not just company, but lessons in skill, grace, resilience.
So, a life packed with adventure inevitably means confronting danger. The memoir details quite a few intense moments, some we've touched on, but they all paint this picture of a life lived pretty close to the edge sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. The Mel's Diner Rumble comes up again, specifically recalling that real fear. The skateboarding downhill dive is remembered for that split-second need for safety. Even swimming in the polluted creek is framed as a conscious risk.
Right. There's the Devil's Lake Muck incident, the panic over lost swim trunks, the paint fight chaos, and that story about Mr. Black fracturing his skull on the ice, leading to everyone wearing wool beanies. Those early ones show this sort of progression of youthful risk-taking.
Then later, the stakes get higher, the physical challenge is more intense. Swimming in the icy, much colder Pacific side of Baja, getting swept back, knocked down, scraped up, feeling pretty shaken up.
And the whale encounter, kayaking too close to feeding humpbacks near Coronado Island.
Terrifying. One veers to avoid his inflatable kayak, barnacles actually scraping the boat. A moment of just praying for minimal damage while his friend Sherry was terrified.
Yikes. Then the near miss with the calf in Idaho, ripping along Highway 47.
Going too fast, Calf runs towards the car. He just puts the hammer down, closes his eyes. Miraculously, no collision. But that image afterwards of the wide-eyed man with his dog, stark.
And the tractor incident, driving downhill on steep ground for logs.
Momentum takes over, hits the brakes, skids sideways, easing off just in time. Close call.
But the Glassford Rapids kayak trip sounds particularly intense.
Oh, yeah. Naively setting off with Vaughn, being told about the rapid, having no spare oar, hearing the sound change, seeing the white water, that panicked beeline to shore.
Trying to navigate with wooden oars as the sound gets louder, fighting for control. Yelling, bail, bail, with a broken bowl.
Reaching an eddy on a granite wall, only to break the right oar. Steve on shore yelling instructions, Vaughn throwing the line, Steve trying to pull them with his mouth.
Desperate stuff.
Totally. Getting over to the left bank to avoid Bob's Hole, known for boaters buying the farm. Getting finger holes on the wall, then schlepping everything through stinging nettles with help. The adrenaline rush afterwards must have been immense.
And finally, the horse-kicking incident. Working at a clinic, trying to help with a sketchy Arabian.
Takes the lead rope, wakes up in the hospital, ear being sewn, broken jaw, severe concussion.
Ooh.
The source clarifies the horse was in pain, acting out. But this incident is framed as a major wake-up call. He was 60, realized he was getting a little long in the tooth to be taking on the crazies in that line of work. The passion and confidence for that specific work just dried up, though his love for animals remained.
These stories aren't just about daring, are they? They show this pattern of living with risk, learning limits, and how navigating these moments built resilience, self-reliance, but also, eventually, the wisdom to know when to step back.
Which brings us to a really major turning point and the fulfillment of, well, a profound purpose. That phone call, May 17, 2018. Surgeon reporting a stage 4 melanoma diagnosis.
Just stark. A moment that changed everything. Led to surgery, removing lymph nodes in his thigh and abdomen.
And the memoir describes waking up, groggy, in the hospital, and seeing his friend Neil Hyman there from the fishing gang.
Neil flew
up to be his caregiver. A huge testament to that Gang of Five bond, especially since the memoirist admits he was too stubborn to ask for help.
needing crutches, staying off his left leg for weeks during recovery. And it was during this period, while recovering at their camp on the Madison, that this vision started to really take shape.
Yeah, he was already working on retrofitting an old homestead on the property with Peter Pauls. He'd owned the place for decades, the tenant wasn't keeping it up, and he was dreading another fix-up job. But then came the light bulb moment. Summer of 2017, actually, before the diagnosis and surgery.
Okay, so the idea was brewing already.
Exactly. He realized Peter Pauls, with all his lifelong expertise adapting equipment for people with disabilities, Peter was the perfect person to bring adaptive fishing efforts to Ennis, using that homestead.
So he pitched it to Peter.
Yeah. But Peter was pretty entrenched in Colorado, initially hesitant, thought maybe a couple years down the road. Frank suggested Peter just visit that September, take a gander at the property.
And that visit led to something bigger.
It led to this fruitful gathering in Ennis. A working lunch Frank arranged with friends, acquaintances, 11 people. The source says Kismet was alive and well. Ideas, encouragement just poured out. An attorney friend volunteered 501c3 help. A contractor husband offered renovation expertise. And crucially, Peter's enthusiasm and knowledge just infected the room. The seed for what would become Camp Bullwheel was powerfully planted right there.
So when Peter actually visited the property itself,
He hadn't seen it in decades. Suddenly felt 10 years old all over again, ideas just exploding. They jointly agreed right then, start renovation April 1st, 2018.
just weeks before the melanoma diagnosis, that timing is incredible. The vision for helping others takes root right before he faces his own huge health challenge.
It feels deeply connected, doesn't it? Facing his own vulnerability, relying on friends like Neil. It probably underscored the whole mission of Camp Bullwheel even more. The camp's director, Chris Glasby, is mentioned too.
Right, suffered a highway accident at 18, became quadriplegic, ended his rodeo dreams.
But now, the memoirist notes, Chris enjoys exponentially more opportunities through nonprofits like Camp Bullwheel. It shows the impact.
So the mission of Camp Bullwheel is clear: hosting sportsmen and women with disabilities and their companions for a week of Montana activities. Float fishing the Madison is at the forefront.
And it's located near Varney Bridge, south of Ennis. Fittingly close to where he used to park his camper near Roy Dean's place.
The camp atmosphere sounds amazing. The homestead, abuzz with activity, guests doing things they thought impossible.
Smiles and tears of joy are infectious, fueled by this deep, heartfelt community support.
And it's all made possible by the adaptive equipment, the adaptive fleet of watercraft, specialized gear.
And specifically, Peter Paul's state-of-the-art hands-free sit-bend-puff apparatus, perfected over 25 years volunteering at Craig Hospital in Denver. Incredible dedication.
The memoir stresses it takes a community. Friends from Craig Hospital, others converge in the summer to help with everything: cooking, rowing, shuttling, building lures, websites, social media.
It's a real collective effort.
And the symbol of the camp, that massive hand-hewn bullwheel relic from 1923.
Seen as representing strength, power, empowerment, longevity.
Giving guests new life into the hopes and dreams, leaving camp empowered after doing something they maybe thought was lost to them.
Exactly. And their ongoing plans, too. Peter remodeling the old kitchen, plans for an outdoor kitchen, a crucial boathouse, and rehab engineering shop.
To shelter the fleet, create, maintain the adaptive gear.
Right. With living quarters for Peter upstairs, it's all centered around enhancing that fishing experience for the guests. Camp Bullwheel really feels like this powerful culmination of so many themes from the memoir. Family, Peter, Neil, the whole community.
Overcoming significant physical challenges his own, and empowering the guests.
And finding this profound purpose in giving others the chance to experience the joy of the wild that was so incredibly formative for him.
Beyond the huge life events, the memoir also touches on this recurring tendency he has to find value in unexpected places, right, in discarded things.
Yeah, like collecting or hunting for hidden gems. Refinishing that old oak icebox found in a shed in Denver, turning it into a bar.
Though he mentions the lung damage from the paint stripper, even collecting had its risks.
True. Or the thrift store finds. The gold mine in Carefree, Arizona, servicing a wealthy area. Finding those high-quality Wolfgang Puck Paella skillets at a flea market. It's not just about getting stuff. It's about patience, searching, seeing potential.
And the grouse hunting with a pitching wedge.
Pretty unique. Finding a young grouse hit by a golf drive, neck broken, popping it in his golf bag for dinner. He calls it turning that activity into real sport, adding, the endless hunt continues.
It's a different kind of seeking and finding, isn't it?
Fun.
Resourcefulness, an eye for value, whether it's an old icebox or an unexpected meal. Finding worth where others might just pass by.
Finally, the memoir offers some reflections on this whole wild ride. He mentions experiencing this incredible feeling of elation twice while fly fishing the Malayo in Argentina and rereading his fishing notes.
A feeling so profound, he says he's only known it one other time since.
That specific feeling of accomplishment, self-reliance, found right there in his passion.
And it leads to that reiterated belief. We all have a gift, sometimes obvious, sometimes latent, that is just waiting to be discovered.
Yeah. And he connects the whole journey back to the start. His mother's abrupt departure, the lonely childhood, the confusion, connecting it all to the resilience and self-reliance that developed over time. Such a powerful arc, showing how profound loss didn't break him, but actually shaped his capacity to build connections, pursue passions, navigate danger, and ultimately find this incredible purpose in giving back.
The memoir really presents this life as a journey of, well, navigating those unpredictable currents, finding those unexpected eddies of connection and opportunity, embracing the adventure and the challenges, and discovering that latent gift, the one that leads to serving others.
What a ride indeed. I mean, from a young life just completely upended by loss, forging an identity as a wild child, finding belonging in all these different games.
Pursuing passions like fishing and real estate with such fierce independence.
Weathering storms, literal and figurative, connecting with these amazing characters, facing down serious health challenges.
And ultimately channeling all that experience into something like Camp Bullwheel, a place of real empowerment.
Yeah, we've really seen how those earliest experiences, especially the loss and that urgent need for connection, they set a course. A challenging one, sure, but one that built this incredible foundation of resilience and self-reliance. Those chosen families, the mentors, they weren't just side characters, they were essential anchors, guides through all the unexpected turns.
It really does make you think about the gangs and connections in our own lives, doesn't it? The people we choose, the bonds we forge, how they sustain us through everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And maybe it leaves you considering this. The memoir talks about finding one's gift. But how much of this wild ride was about simply discovering that gift versus how much was about actively creating the opportunities through sheer resilience and resourcefulness to actually live it out fully?
That's something to ponder. Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the source you provided. We really hope it gave you some valuable insights and maybe even sparked some thoughts about your own journey.